The Denver Nuggets keep on rolling. They continue making waves in NBA free agency, and it has me raising a question about whether or not the Denver Nuggets or the Colorado Avalanche which team will miss their star player more, as we've seen two members of their core four in each respective franchise shipped out in the last year. And have the Nuggets, with one of their more recent moves, finally answered a question that they've really been unable to answer for the majority of Nikola Jokic's career? That will be where we go on today's rundown, and we will begin in the world of the NBA, where that front office, those co-executive VPs that I raised my hand yesterday, I'll raise it again today, and just say I was a doubter. I wasn't sure. I was so caught up in the need and the necessity, which is a valid one, to make every decision in the Nikola Jokic prime years, this era of basketball that the Nuggets currently find themselves in, scrutinized to the highest degree to ensure that all things are pointed toward maximizing the point in time that we currently live, where the best basketball player on planet Earth has an area code and a zip code that registers here with us in Denver. So far, Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, the co-executive vice presidents of basketball operations and player personnel, are making the previous regime of just Calvin Booth by himself look flat out silly. We saw a viral video coming out of the Phoenix Suns organization where Calvin Booth is on the phone with Phoenix Suns executives talking about trading up from 28 to 22 with the hope of eventually selecting Deron Holmes in the draft, the rookie who missed his entire rookie season due to a torn Achilles. And in that process, Calvin Booth, in real time, bids against himself, ultimately costing him another second-round pick in that year's draft just to get a deal done that the Phoenix Suns, as we learned, were basically ready to accept on principle. So to go from that level of viral mocking ineptitude, like we saw with Calvin Booth and all the toxicity that came about in the feud between he and Michael Malone over philosophical differences on how to run and operate the basketball team, the new tenure for this newest regime that is taking over for the winningest head coach in franchise history, the past torch to David Adelman, and this front office regime that is tasked with undoing and living through the sins and mistakes of their predecessor, Calvin Booth, in Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, starts their chapter off with a bang. Trading Michael Porter Jr. into the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Cam Johnson, having to ship a 2032 first-round pick in the process. That got things going just after 4 o'clock Mountain Time at the opening of free agency. And then bringing back Bruce Brown on a vet minimum deal, according to Sam Amick and others around the league, to bring back one of the core pieces, the critical pieces, I should say, that supplemented this core of then MPJ, Jokic, Jamal, and Aaron Gordon, and help them get over that hump of conference championship, conference final, or second round semifinal, and into the NBA Finals, and then ultimately winning in 5 games against the Miami Heat for the first time in franchise history. Bruce Brown and KCP were the two figureheads of Calvin Booth's tenure that helped the Nuggets get from almost there to finally got it. And now one of those players comes back after 2 years away, chasing a bag in Indiana, ends up getting shipped to Toronto for Pascal Siakam, and then finds his way to New Orleans and gets caught in that washing machine cycle of player bought out and sent here and traded there, and just wants to come home. Home to the place where he spent one season, but it was the most impactful season of his career, and one of the most impactful seasons in the history of the Denver Nuggets, where he bonded with the likes of Jokic and Murray and Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown and won with them at the highest level. And now he returns to try to do the same in what ultimately could be a pretty similar role, as we discussed yesterday. And what we touched on yesterday that I want to dig into more today is the third move of the Nuggets free agency saga as it continues to unravel, which was finally finding a potential answer that seems to have promise to the one question they haven't really been able to answer during the entirety of Nikola Jokic's prime. Who can be a reliable backup five for the Denver Nuggets? Who can be a backup big man to spell the Joker during minutes in the regular season so he's not averaging 40 to 45 minutes a night, and into the postseason when it matters most and surviving the non-Jokic minutes becomes even more critical? And Ben Tenzer and John Wallace have their answer to that question now in the form of Jonas Valanciunas, who comes over from the Sacramento Kings in exchange for, if you can believe it, Dario freaking Saric, the player that was the mid-level exception candidate for Calvin Booth, who Calvin flew all the way to Serbia to partly check in on and help orchestrate, and maybe Jokic was a part of that urging as well. Whoever, regardless of who urged it or who brought it on, it was a disaster here in Denver. Saric could barely find his way to the court. Michael Malone had no interest in playing him, and that did not change under David Adelman. Saric opts into his $5.2, $5.4 million player option that he was given, as anyone in his position would, and kind of just continued to represent this albatross in the center of the Nuggets roster on the bottom end that they weren't seemingly going to get rid of. No. Not an impossible task for Ben Tenzer and John Wallace. They engage in this trade with Sacramento for the 33-year-old Valanciunas in a straight-up player-for-player swap, Dario Saric for Jonas Valanciunas. They dump and get out of a bad, useless contract and bring in a player who could legitimately be that physical presence at the center position, and somebody that can allow Jokic to take the adequate and requisite amount of rest that is going to be needed if he's going to have the freshest legs in the postseason, and an outcome that ultimately, if it happened last season, could have made the difference between a Game 7 win and a Game 7 loss for the Nuggets to the eventual champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. When you add all of these names up, Cam Johnson comes in for Michael Porter Jr. Bruce Brown comes back on a vet minimum deal. Jonas Valanciunas becomes a Denver Nugget by way of the Sacramento Kings, and in the process gets rid of a bad contract in MPJ that was bloated and crippling under the new apron structure. Gets rid of a terrible, useless contract, player option deal that was handed to Dario Saric. Brings back cheaper and at minimum replacement level, and if not superseding level play from the two incoming guys, and brings back a key cog, a sixth, seventh man type player, and a spark plug off the bench like Bruce Brown, who has championship pedigree and experience with this organization, all in a span of 36 hours. Are you friggin' kidding me? This new Nuggets regime in front office is putting on a clinic, the likes of which makes you look back on the years with Calvin Booth and really anything post Tim Connolly and wonder, what the hell have we been missing out on? It could not be on paper a better start to the new chapter of this franchise and this new regime's stamp on the organization as they look to usher things forward beyond Calvin Booth and Michael Malone and the dark negative stigma that hung around like a dark cloud toward the end of that tenure. My hat figuratively and literally goes off to those two gentlemen who I doubted pretty significantly, as I mentioned yesterday, and I will continue to raise my hand until it's no longer necessary to do so. Man, I could not be more happy to, at least for now, be looking like I was proven wrong. In a more broad sense, when you look at the two teams that call Ball Arena home, the Avalanche and the Nuggets, they both have similar feelings. If they were going to need to go to a support group, they would both have similar grief to be able to share. And that is, they watched a key member of a championship core shipped out of town in the last year. Mikko Rantanen goes to the Carolina Hurricanes and ends up in Dallas with the Stars and helps ultimately put the exclamation point on the Avs' first-round loss to Dallas with some heroic performances. And Michael Porter Jr., a member of a championship core here in Denver who overcame significant adversity to be able to perform and contribute the way that he has early in his career, and then ultimately all the way up to the end of his career where he was playing through a clear debilitating shoulder injury that was having him wear a diaper-like apparatus on his shoulder that impacted his shooting form, but it was ultimately deemed that his presence on the court, albeit at a significantly reduced rate of efficiency, was better than not at all. He goes to Brooklyn, and now two teams will have two championship cores that have 25% of them shaved off in the last year. So my question is, which team is going to miss their superstar championship core level player more, and which team is best equipped to repeat as a champion in their absence, the Colorado Avalanche or the Denver Nuggets? Here's where I land on it. I think the Colorado Avalanche are going to miss Mikko Rantanen more than the Nuggets will miss Michael Porter Jr. But I also think they are currently, as constructed, better equipped to navigate the gauntlet of a Western Conference in the NHL with toughness even within their own division and get to a Stanley Cup final and win another Stanley Cup more so than the Denver Nuggets are equipped to reload from Michael Porter Jr., navigate through the NBA's Western Conference, get back to an NBA Finals, and win a second Larry O'Brien trophy. The Avalanche, even without Mikko Rantanen, still have arguably two of the top 3 to 5 players in the National Hockey League in Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. They also have a seemingly healthy and returning Gabe Landeskog, who's going to contribute again at a high level if his performance in the postseason is any indication of future performances. And then you have Valeri Nichushkin, who has proven to be such a spark plug for this team to the degree that they are closer to a 750 win percentage team with him on the ice and closer to a coin flip team when he's off the ice, and Arturi Lehkonen. And you add the bolstered depth with Brock Nelson and the revamped goalie room of Scott Wedgwood, Mackenzie Blackwood, your fourth line help with a guy like Jack Drury, Marty Necas getting an opportunity to get a full season under his belt, and the added cap flexibility that they have by shipping Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood out of town with their ability to continue reloading and potentially find some help on the blue line with their third defense pairing and maybe even some help on that third line as well. They, to me, are better equipped to return to and win a Stanley Cup than the Nuggets are to return to and win an NBA Finals. Because the Nuggets, I don't think they're going to miss MPJ as much, because I think Cam Johnson is going to be able to provide you the majority of the things to a respectable level that you were getting from MPJ, and then give you more in the areas of defense, ball handling, and movement within an offense, instead of often devolving to what felt like a cherry-picking nature where Michael Porter Jr. sets up in his spot from the corner or out there on the wing and kind of just waits for the ball to gravitate his way, where the offense would then abruptly stop. I also think that the gauntlet that the Avalanche would have to go through in their Western Conference and within their Central Division is more difficult than what the Nuggets will have to face when you look at the Vegas Golden Knights, the Winnipeg Jets, the Dallas Stars, the Minnesota Wild, the Edmonton Oilers. Those are all teams, several of which are within the Avalanche's own division, that the Avs would have to go through. And I think that represents a more significant challenge than the Nuggets having to go through the likes of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who they just took to 7 games, despite them being the defending champions. The Houston Rockets, revamped and reloaded with Kevin Durant, still wouldn't be as afraid for the Nuggets to be able to go through a team like that. The Lakers, who are making moves and shaking under their new ownership, who just acquired them for north of $10 billion. The LA Clippers, all of which teams that are getting better or at a minimum making attempts to restock the shelves and reload. But Nikola Jokic's ability to mask the deficiencies of the Denver Nuggets in a 5-on-5 basketball game supersedes the ability of a great like Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar, etc. It's the sum of the parts that is greater for the Colorado Avalanche and would give them, I think, a better equipped chance to repeat as Cup champs than the Nuggets, despite the greatest overall piece in this discussion being Nikola Jokic. Ultimately, I hope both teams are able to do this, and I think that both teams have a reasonable argument and a shot to do so. The remainder of this summer is going to go a long way toward determining whether or not that's a realistic option. The Avalanche are currently a top 3 to 4 favorite to win the Stanley Cup, and the Nuggets saw their title odds essentially double, or I guess cut in half. They got lower from about a plus 1,700 to a plus 850 with the moves that were made, really just the first two, in Cam Johnson and Bruce Brown. We will see what the rest of free agency in both the NBA and NHL have in store for us. Happy Hump Day to you all. We are inching closer to that holiday weekend for 4th of July. I can smell the Joey Chestnut hot dog eating contest. I can smell the fireworks. The Rockies, who put on the best fireworks show in town despite having the worst baseball team in the history of Major League Baseball, will be an absolute attraction, and I cannot wait for it all. We'll catch you tomorrow.